When we hear the words mergers and acquisitions, or M&A for short, it's easy to just picture a bunch of spreadsheets and stuffy boardrooms. But honestly, the reality is way more dramatic than that. You should think of it less like a dry business deal and more like a high stakes corporate marriage. It's this huge union that can either create a powerful new empire or, end in a very public and a very, very expensive divorce. So that really brings up the big question, right? Why on earth would a totally successful company risk its fortune, its reputation, basically its entire future just to buy another one? What's the thinking there that makes a multi-billion-dollar bet like that seem like a good idea? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get a handle on what this corporate marriage is all about. Then we'll dig into the strategic reasons behind it all. After that, we'll talk about the magic promise of synergy before getting real about the huge risks involved. And finally, we'll ask the million-dollar question: who actually comes out on top? Okay, so let's make sure we're all on the same page. At its very core, an M&A deal is just when two companies decide to join forces. Sometimes it's a merger of equals, but let's be honest, it's usually an acquisition, where one company straight up buys another one and takes control. But it's so much more than just a transaction. The source material we're looking at uses this really interesting French term for it, croissance externe, which just means external growth. And it really gets at this fundamental choice every company has to make. See, you can grow from the inside out, build new factories, develop new products from scratch, or you can go for external growth and just buy a company that's already done all that hard work for you. It really is the ultimate choice. Do you build or do you buy? So why choose to buy? Well, the reasons behind these big corporate marriages are almost never simple, but you can usually sort them into one of two buckets. You're either playing offense to conquer new territory, or you're playing defense to protect what you've already got. On the offensive side of things, a company might buy another to instantly grab more market share, or to gobble up some cool new technology, or maybe even to just parachute into a new country overnight. It's a total power move. But on defense, the strategy is much more about survival. If you're in a shrinking industry, you might merge with a rival just to stay afloat. Or you might buy a smaller company just to stop a bigger competitor from getting their hands on it first. It's like a giant game of corporate chess, and every single move is critical. Now, there is one word, one magic word that you will hear used to justify pretty much every single M&A deal out there. It's the secret sauce, the special ingredient that's supposed to make this whole risky thing worth it. And that word is synergy. So synergy is the core promise of M&A. It's this belief that when you combine company A and company B, you don't just get the value of A plus B. Nope, you get something more. And that's how they justify paying a huge premium over a company's stock price. So you're not just buying the company as it is today. You're buying what it could be once it's married to yours. And this right here captures that dream perfectly. The idea that you can create value almost out of thin air. You take one profitable company, you add another one, and somehow, poof, you end up with the power and the profit of three. I know it sounds like magic, but executives truly believe they can engineer it. So where is all this magical new value supposed to come from? Well, the theory points to a few main places. First, you've got operational synergy. This is the most common one. Think about combining two sales teams into one, or closing down redundant offices to save a ton on rent. Then you have financial synergy. This could be something like a clever tax strategy that's only possible after the company's combined. And finally, there's managerial synergy. This is where, say, the acquiring company's world-class marketing team takes the target's amazing product and turns it into a global bestseller. Man, that dream of 1 + 1 = 3 is a powerful one. It's the story they tell shareholders, the media, everyone. But the reality of these corporate marriages, it often falls brutally short of those honeymoon promises. And this is where the real gamble begins. Just take a second and really look at this number. According to the research, nearly half, 50%, of all mergers and acquisitions are considered economic failures. Just let that sink in for a moment. It means that for all the brilliant strategy and financial wizardry, striking one of these deals is statistically no better than a coin toss. And this, right here, is the central paradox of it all. If the logic is so solid and the potential rewards are so huge, why do half of these carefully planned marriages end in total failure? What are the hidden icebergs just waiting to sink these corporate titans? Well, the reasons are often painfully human. Bidding wars can get out of control, leading companies to wildly overpay. Sometimes it's just pure managerial arrogance, an executive team that's so overconfident they think they can fix any problem. But probably the biggest killer of them all? Culture. You can merge balance sheets overnight, sure, but you can't just force two completely different company cultures, basically two families with different values, different ways of doing things, to suddenly get along. And that is where all those theoretical synergies just evaporate into thin air. So, if it's a 50-50 shot for the company doing the buying, that kind of begs the question, right? Is anyone consistently winning in this game? Well, to find the answer, we just have to do one thing: follow the money. And this table tells a very, very clear story. The shareholders of the acquiring company, the buyer, they often see pretty low or even negative returns in the long run. I mean, they're the ones taking on all the risk of making this thing work. Meanwhile, the shareholders of the target company, the one being bought, they almost always get an immediate and pretty significant payday from what's called the acquisition premium. And that brings us to this direct quote from our source material, which really couldn't be any clearer. The most consistent winners, the principal winners in the M&A game, are the shareholders of the company that gets bought. They get to cash out at a premium, while the buyer is left to deal with the messy, uncertain aftermath of the marriage. So here's the absolute crucial point to take away from all this. The company making the purchase is the one taking on most, if not all, of the risk. They're betting they can make 1 + 1 = 3. They take on the debt, the integration headaches, all of it. The company being sold, they simply take the money and walk away. It's kind of like the difference between buying a lottery ticket and selling one. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. If the data shows that buying another company is, at best, a 50-50 shot at creating value, are these massive, world-changing deals really being driven by cold, hard strategy? Or is there something else at play? Something like the ego and the empire-building ambitions of the executives at the very top? Now that's a question we're thinking about.